You know, life is really weird sometimes. It wasn't that long ago that I was watching shows like Creation Today and response videos to them on channels like Paulogia and Vice Rhino and Logic from the sidelines. And I was trying to think up the things that I would say if I was ever presented the opportunity myself to respond. Well, guys, now I have the opportunity. Ben Shetler and I have some serious disagreements on the definitions of truth and love and understanding and compassion. And he has some things that he would really like to say to me.
Hey Shannon, I want to make this video for you because I know it's kind of like annoying going back and forth. So, is compassion and understanding truth?
So, let's discourse, shall we? This should be interesting. Hi everyone, and welcome to Shannon Q. If you're new here and enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. But before we get into it, I just want to say a massive thank you to the viewers who have sent me amazing things to the P.O. box in the description. I am really, really grateful, and I'm really, really humbled and appreciative. And I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to express that to you guys. Thank you so much. But now we have to talk about Ben. For those of you who don't know Ben Shetler, he's a former co-host of Creation Today with Eric Hovind, who is working on a television show called Truth and Love. He's a very, very devout Christian with a ministry that has a fairly sizable following on Facebook, and he and I have had numerous amiable conversations in the past on a variety of topics, from Chick-fil-A to morality. To contextualize what sparked this interaction between Ben and I that led to this response, I need to first let you know that I am in the midst of working on a video explaining the American Christian Counseling Association's stance on reparative and conversion therapies for members of the LGBTQ community. That video requires some really serious research, and it's gonna take some time. And as a part of it, I sent out this request on my social media platforms. Most counselors and therapists who employ the approach that anything non-cis heteronormative is deviant and to be corrected back to a normal standard justify their actions by invoking love. I've sent out a request for anybody who is subjected to reparative or conversion therapies and is safely able to provide me with a very brief testimonial in video, text, or audio form for the inclusion in that video. That request is still open, by the way, so if anybody is in a comfortable space and feels like they can do that, please take care of you first, but I would love to receive them. Now, Ben responded to this post. He responds to many of my posts, and I to his, as we generally have fairly amicable interactions that lead both of us ostensibly to, at the very least, a better understanding of each other's position. Now, the totality of my responses to Ben on the post itself constituted 7 words. 6 of those words were a question, and the last response to whether or not he answered that question. My short responses aren't a reflection of my desire to interact with Ben in this particular instance. It was a time constraint, but lots of interesting things came out of that engagement. So here we are. The screenshots themselves have been up on the screen. If you'd like to pause them and take a look at what that interaction fully entailed, please do. But I don't want to linger on it because most of what I am interested in addressing came in the 2 videos that Ben posted afterwards. One in the body of my Facebook post and the other independently on his public Facebook page. And there is a lot to respond to. So, let's have a look at what Ben had to say to me regarding this, keeping in mind that the context of the dialogue here was me working towards a critique of the concept that deconversion and reparative therapies to change someone's sexual orientation could constitute love.
When it comes to my ultimate statement, what I was trying to say is that without truth, you can't really know how to be loving. So if it is true that a person is designed a certain way, then telling them they were not designed that way is unloving. The question is, how were they designed? Or in what way, what is their essence? And I think that is where this debate really lies, is it's wrong to exercise reparative therapy to make someone who they aren't. The question is what are they? And that's what I meant by you can't have love, you can't have compassion unless you know what the truth is, if that makes sense.
Now, I had initially asked if compassion and understanding were true, when Ben indicated that in order to be loving, you first must determine what the truth of a situation is. My reason for this was fairly simple. I wanted to establish that an empathy and understanding for someone's state of affairs was a requirement to determine the truth of the situation in that engagement. Ben, however, has chosen a different track. Now I'm going to cut right to the chase here. I know that's not generally my style, but I think that this situation calls for it. It's my perspective here, Ben, that the reason what's true in regards to being compassionate is even up for negotiation is because you have your own underlying truth that conflicts with compassionate intuitions, possibly even yours. I would agree with you that in order to demonstrate compassion, there are certain things that we need to take as truth, not the least of which being what is harmful. To me, telling someone that who they are fundamentally as a person is wrong, especially when they are not harming themselves or another living soul, and attempting to coerce them into an existence that doesn't fulfill them, is harm. And to endorse anything that leads to that end is the opposite of compassion. I also think that you may hold a definition of compassion that entails preventing unnecessary harm. However, the truth for you is that if people who are same-sex attracted choose to live freely and be who they are intrinsically, they will be punished for it. That punishment is beyond your control, so the only thing that you can do is warn them and encourage them to change. And Ben, that is the problem. I get why you want to call it love, but it's not, Ben. It's harm. But Ben wasn't finished having things to say to me or to his audience about this. So he went on his main page to do a Facebook live chat shortly after, and there's more discourse. Way more discourse. We're going to get discourse everywhere, all over the place, guys. So buckle in.
Last night I came to an incredible realization via a conversation I had with an atheist online. And it's something that every single Christian needs to be aware of in our culture and what is happening.
That's right, everyone. Listen up. Even when I type only a small number of words on Facebook, people come to incredible realizations. Video over, we're done. Just kidding. Of course we're not. Also, Ben fixed his hair for this, and I'm there for it. There for it.
And I will not be surprised if this video gets removed from Facebook or even gets taken down. And that would be heartbreaking to me because you have to understand my heart. I am passionate about speaking the truth in love.
Couldn't just stop there, could you, Ben? No, I thought we had a breakthrough. Okay, so what's fascinating to me is that this video is most assuredly still available. It's linked in its entirety in the description. And in fact, it was posted a few months ago. I know, I'm slow on content. I get it. I know. I'm sorry. I know. But there's this prominent perception that Christian opinions are being censored. That's consistently pushed. I'm aware that it's prominent because I see myriad videos and look at multiple non-deleted posts that suggest they might be taken down, yet oddly, none of them are. There is a preponderance of social media apologists who strongly indicate that this is the case, that it just doesn't seem to be accurate based on the abject volume of available content. When the notion that an opinion is taboo, censored, blacklisted, under threat, and perilously close to being criminal is posited with frequency, it is an effective way to activate people who hold it. It motivates people towards action, to not only fight the perceived censorship, but to propagate the message to counter that impending censorship. That may not be what Ben is doing here. This may not be purposeful, but be aware that it is, in many instances, a manipulation tactic to instill fear in a base that even tangentially hold your position, to defend your right to express it, and propagate it on your behalf in order to protect that right. That's just something that's really frustrating to me because I see it so constantly. But let's get back to Ben. He has some things to say about what my positions are regarding LGBTQIA+ rights, and it's only fair that we should hear those criticisms and address them fairly. As I mentioned, the entire video is in the description. I've chosen excerpts for the sake of time, so please reference it to make sure that I've provided fair and appropriate context for Ben's arguments.
We aren't allowed to discuss what is true. Therefore, our conclusions wind up being unloving, or regardless of your genuine compassion for someone else. And so let me explain what was happening. She was talking about a problem with what she calls reparative therapy. And what this is and it depends how you define this. But typically, if someone takes a Bible and shows someone else what the creator of the universe, God, what the creator of the universe says about that book, when we take the Bible and do that, she's saying that very act is unloving.
So, as usual, there are several things to unpack and address in this brief segment of dialogue, and I'm going to do my best, so bear with me. Now, from my perspective, and I'll be addressing this in more precise detail in a future video, regardless of how you define reparative or conversion therapy, it's damaging psychologically. The entire reason it exists is as a method of training people to suppress and distort innate behavioral, social, emotional, and pair bonding life desires. It does this at the peril of those who participate in it, many of whom, arguably most or all of whom, do so because they have succumbed to pressure from a religious ideology, social stigmatization, or a familial force that has deemed who they are, for whatever reason, to be unacceptable. Now, I'm not comfortably armed as of yet to fully and adequately address this component of the dialogue with the nuance and detail that it requires, but I want my position on this to be abundantly clear as we proceed. Once I finalize that video, I'll link it above. The remainder of this section of Ben's dialogue pertains to what is and isn't allowed to be presented as true, and the potential effect that may have, with a smattering of assertion that you aren't even allowed to present the truth as Ben sees it. Now, I'm going to ask Ben a very honest question here, and this goes to anybody else who sees themselves as being in Ben's position. Do you legitimately believe that you aren't allowed to discuss your biblical positions on same-sex attraction? Or is it possible that when you do, you are met with dissent, anger, refutation, and social consequences, and that is being conflated with legitimate censorship? Is it plausible, Ben, that people not being receptive to what you have to say is distinctly different than literally not being permitted to say it. The words that you have chosen here, Ben, would indicate to me that you're either attempting to give the impression that it's not permissible or you legitimately feel that it isn't. Given that this video has 3.5 thousand views as of right now on your Facebook page, is still up, and is loaded with affirming comments for your perspective, I'd suggest that you need to reassess that position fairly stringently. Also, please just stop with the vertical video. Stop. Just turn it like this. Like this. Not like this. Do it like this. Now let's get to the actual point. The place where you feel you refute my position that overt condemnation of people who are same-sex attracted isn't even anything resembling love. Here we go.
The problem is with this, we have assumed. We're not even allowed to discuss whether or not it is true that gay relationships are good for the people that are in them and are good for culture at large. We're not allowed to even have that conversation. We just have to assume, well, they must be.
Healthier relationships are good for people, and that is not an assumption. Same-sex relationships are relationships like any other and are good for people in them when all parties are respected, heard, and have their needs met, etc. That's not an assumption at all. That's an actual fact. Before I play the next clip, let's all just take a minute to contemplate that the issue here is that apparently we are not even allowed to have a conversation about this. We just can't. That is the problem, right? We cannot talk about this. We are not allowed no talking about this.
One of the examples of this is this actual person I debated. You can find it on my Facebook. But the conversation that I had with her,
Shannon Q, actual person. What's obvious is that we cannot have these conversations, except for the time that Ben and I literally had this exact conversation, and our interaction on Facebook, and his subsequent video responses, and me posting this video right now, and anything that follows this video. Aside from that, we literally cannot even have this conversation that we already had, that you just referenced right after you said that we can't even have these conversations. I mean, you see my point here, right, Ben? Let's move on.
during the conversation, she said, well, hypothetically, what if you were gay? And I was like, well, what do you mean? She goes, forget that. What if every man in America or in the world was gay? How would you absorb it? What if they were all gay? And one of the things I said, well, in this hypothetical situation, that would only last one generation. Because biologically, two men can't make a baby. It's not biologically possible. And I'll never forget the sneer that she gave me because I'm not allowed to even consider what is true in this particular area.
Okay. So before we carry on, I think that it's really important that we take a look at the excerpt from the conversation that Ben and I had so you can all feast your eyes upon my resting sneer face. If you are in love with somebody of the same gender as you are free to marry that person. However, this is where the complexity and perhaps the nuance comes in. There's a perception, and like I said, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that many, many Christians would wish for a society that was constructed otherwise, that was constricting in that fashion, that that somebody like me in that scenario, in that hypothetical scenario, would not be able to marry the person that I love and carry on a life with them. And that is scary. If I, for example, had made a determination, had a disagreement with you, and I determined that all Christians should only be able to marry somebody of the same sex, and I lived my life in a fashion that I donated money to groups that helped push that as a political agenda, and I perpetuated that message as much as I could on social media, and I had discussions about how that should be the case, you would undoubtedly and justifiably be upset about that, because I am attempting to compel people and to construct a society that doesn't allow you to live your life in the fashion that you choose and that you should be able to, right? Like you'd probably be justifiably upset with me in that situation.
Yeah,
right?
no, I would be upset. I would want the law changed. I wouldn't want to be forced to only have to marry men. Coincidentally, that society would last one generation. It would kind of be difficult. I mean, like, that doesn't work.
Behold the sneer, folks. Drink it in. That is a face that topples mountains. I am a formidable opponent, and you should fear me. Okay, I hope everybody's had enough time to recover, because you may have noticed that that didn't go down quite the way that it was portrayed. I was actually looking to establish empathy here. My question wasn't, what if you were gay? Though I think at some point in the conversation I may have asked him that. My question at this point was, what if you remained heterosexual, but all of the laws of the land prevented you from marrying a woman? What if society was constructed in a way that made it difficult or impossible for you to be with the person that you love? What if you were surrounded by people who told you that God himself wanted you to be different than who you are, but you couldn't change? How would you feel? My point here was that it's fairly easy to tell people that they have to be like you when you haven't the slightest inclination what it's like to be them. We were discussing what love is when this set of interactions began, what compassion is. Compassion holds its roots in empathy, in the ability to pause it and ponder what it must be like to attempt to understand another person's situation and perspective. There's no universal, unifying truth that applies to every individual's perspective and experience that you can even appeal to. You don't get that from telling people how they should be. You determine it by asking them how they are, if they're okay, what they feel, what they need, and what their perspective is. It seems that you appeal to truth here, Ben, because for you, the truth is that the answer to those questions don't even matter. Because if you're anything but cis heterosexual, the ultimate eternal harm will befall you, and that supersedes any harm that you're experiencing now. You're participating in the sacrifice of people's present happiness and fulfillment on the altar of their potential eternity, and that is not your place. I'd like to make that clear. Just because that you think something is true, that doesn't mean it is.
And the reality is that it's absolutely true. If every man in the world were gay, and didn't have a physical relationship with a woman, or there wasn't something biologically done to them to remove that biological part of them that can pass their seed on to a woman, then we wouldn't exist.
Say it with me, Ben. Sperm. The word you're looking for is sperm. And it's a strange objection to me. It's akin to saying, if we start saying that it's okay to be gay, then all of it, we'll all just be gay. And then we'll go extinct. There's a bunch of ways that we likely probably wouldn't go extinct for starters, but it's also absurd. You can't just spin a wheel and choose sexual orientations. Also, that's not the point that anybody was trying to make to begin with.
And that is true. But here's a more dangerous thing and a more dangerous truth that's even influencing our students right now, today, right now. We are using curriculum in the state of California that's telling 4 and 5-year-olds to explore their genitals and to ignore those and to invent some version of their humanness. Right now, in fact, last school year, at the end of the school year, a 4th grader on a playground at a Christian school in Tennessee goes to her 4th grade friend and tells her, I'm not sure if I'm a man or I'm not sure if I am a boy or a girl. And the girl, her friend was like, well, you're a girl. And she goes, oh, that's what I am biologically. We are confusing a generation on what is empirically true, and somehow we are okay with that. And you're not even allowed to discuss it.
All right, so the first part of this sounded bonkers to me, so I looked it up. The link is in the description, and it's a curriculum mandate from the California Board of Education. Now, this is going to come as a massive shock to everyone, but they are in fact not asking 5-year-old children in California to examine their genitals. They're just not. The document itself is about 150 pages, and the word genitals doesn't show up once in any of those pages. The word gender does, however. Pages 45 and 46 are the only one of those instances that pertain to kindergarten. So what are they teaching these kids exactly? They're introducing them to the concept that gender identities exist. They literally state that in the mandate. That's all they're doing. They aren't even attempting to tell them that they should or shouldn't identify one way or the other, and they don't even kind of link it to genitals. They just teach them about gender stereotypes that exist and that people have different identities and, help guide them towards trans acceptance. The humanity. Teaching all of these vulnerable children that they don't need to adhere to gender stereotypes, to identify as a boy or a girl, and that there are people who are expected to adhere to a confluence of those stereotypes from birth who identify outside of them. I couldn't find the second story because it just sounds like a common occurrence. One of the reasons that it is that we tell children from a really young age what it is to be a boy or a girl in very clear social, behavioral, and aesthetic dimensions when they're really young. People don't fit well into those sort of arbitrary boxes, and as a child, that could be exceptionally confusing. All the more reason that we need better education and acceptance so that if a child is dysphoric or gender confused or confused about the stereotypes that are presented to them, they have safe spaces to explore what it means to them. Also, what does gender identity even have to do with what we're talking about? We were talking about attraction, not gender identity. But this is all one big alarmist package when these things come up. And again, here we are discussing it. It's almost like we're allowed to or something.
And so what I'm saying is the most loving thing you can tell someone is the truth, but we have to discover what is true before we can have this conversation. You can't really help someone if they don't know what the truth is.
Okay. I'm going to reiterate this one more time in the hopes that it gets through. Disagreement and disdain for your opinions isn't censorship. You might feel like you can't say what you want to because you are met with social repercussions when you do, but that's not censorship. That's people letting you know that they do not like what you have to say. Now, I get that can feel pretty awful, but literally no one is stopping you. You being uncomfortable to the reception of your words and that acting as a deterrent from continuing to speak isn't censorship. It's other people exercising their right to free speech to tell you what they think about your opinions. And I'd like you to really, really carefully assess what it is that you're saying, Ben, and contemplate why you're receiving a reaction that makes you feel that way. You just said that we need to have a serious conversation about what identities are acceptable to have, Ben. That's love. That's compassion. I very much doubt that you'd be receptive to the idea that anyone should have a dialogue regarding whether it's okay for you to be a Christian. There are people like me who don't think that that's true because I deem it to be false. Does that in any way open a door to me to be a proponent that you shouldn't be allowed to be Christian, Ben? I don't think it's true. And by your standards, in order to have compassion, my overriding criteria should be appealing to what I think is true. Do you see where that leads, Ben? We can't have one group of people making determinations of whether or not it's okay to be something different from their standard of identity or orientation. Our standards need to be founded on empathy and compassion and protection. No one is hurting you or anyone else by being who they are in a consensual, healthy relationship. Nobody is hurting you or anyone else by expressing their gender. The only person hurting people is you and people like you who spend their time trying to convince anyone who will listen to them that they aren't okay as they are and that they should change, even if it makes them miserable, because it's better for you. And guess what? Me telling you that? That's not censorship, Ben. But it is true. Thank you everybody for watching, and as always, a massive, insanely huge thank you to my patrons. You guys make all of this possible, and I can't thank you enough for everything that you do. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe and share. And also, everybody, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. I want to see your opinions. And as always, help elevate the discourse.